Well, sir, who the heck are you?
My name is Raymond O'Regan. I'm a lecturer from Queen's University. Now, I'm Catholic. I don't belong to this church. The reason I open it is a very important part of Irish history, not just Belfast history, but Irish history, because the people in this church, over the period they've been here, from 1695, most of the congregation have been, and the preachers have been free thinkers. They're not open, not afraid of ideas, and even today, the current minister, Nigel Playfair, is exactly the same sort of mould. Very free thinker, and his sermons, for instance, I've heard one or two, make you really think about religion, you know.
Now, this is an important church for a number of reasons, isn't it? You pointed me out to a pew over there, something to do with the slave trade. Tell me a bit about that, sir.
Right. There was a gentleman who belonged to the second church, because there was 3 churches in the street. This is the first, behind was the second, and down the street was the third. A member of the second church, a man called Waddell Cunningham. Now, he had been a very successful Caribbean trader in New York. He's back in Belfast, and what he does is he... Do you want me to... Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Talk to you.
Whatever's convenient. The nice thing is this is completely raw, so
right,
just go for it.
Talk to the lens or what? Or?
That'll be fine,
okay.
sir, yeah.
So you can edit that then. So the gentleman from the second church was the church behind here. He calls a meeting of these well-to-do Belfast merchants, and the idea would be that they would buy a ship and take manufactured goods from Belfast to the Gold Coast, today's Ghana. Get your money for that, pick up your captured slaves, take them across the West Indies, the Southern Carolinas, get your money for the slaves, and you bring back cotton, molasses and rum. A very lucrative triangle. What he had seen was, especially him being a trader in New York, is that Bristol and Liverpool, particularly Bristol, 500,000 slaves transported in 2,000 ships over the period up until it was banned. That's what he had seen. So there was millions of pounds in today's money to be made. And Belfast would have been as large a city as Liverpool, because Liverpool transported 250,000 slaves. Liverpool, Bristol and Belfast would all be similar in size. Belfast really is a small sort of city. Such part of that's due to the Blitz, the IRA bombs, such we've lost quite a lot. But before that, as I say, if this had gone ahead in 1786, Belfast would have been a really, really grand city.
Fantastic. Now, you
that's
mentioned
just one person.
Isn't that amazing?
This church, he was a goldsmith and watchmaker. As I say, just that one person goes along to the meeting. Basically, sorry, I'll continue on. He goes along to the meeting, stands in front of these group of rich merchants, and basically condemns them for even thinking of what they were going to do. And he basically, part of what he said was, may God wither the hand of anybody who signs a document who gives the first guinea. And as it was, he embarrassed him so much that it never came to be. And Belfast never had a slave trade. Now, but being a historian, you have to balance this out. There was already commerce between Belfast and the West Indies, and the ship's captains here, what they were doing, taking food across for use by the slave owners and food for the slaves. The shoemakers in Belfast, there was over 200, increased to over 300, because what had been asked by the plantation owners was to make broad-fitting shoes for use by the slave. So there was, contribution from Belfast to the plantations, but never in the sort of transporting of human flesh.
Wow. John Wesley, of course, was a real...
Another thing too, yeah, typical of this church, John Wesley, he travelled extensively throughout Ireland, and Monday 8th of June 1789, if we had been standing here, we would have been among 600 people crowded in the church to listen to John Wesley speaking. If you look at the pulpit up there...
come on this side here and we'll get that pulpit in there.
That would have been Monday 8th of June, John Wesley would have been standing there preaching to a packed house.
Wow.
Now, he would have been invited back the second day. Unfortunately, the sexton came to him and told Mr. Wesley, sorry, I can't invite you back the second day. One person among the crowd had used the opportunity to steal a silver rim of the Bible. So unfortunately, he didn't have a second day. But typical of his church, him being a Methodist, they allowed him to, as I say, and it was to a packed house. Fantastic, sir. Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask you a couple of questions? Yeah, could you tell us about the Roman Catholic connection? That's Another thing
very
too is,
interesting.
obviously, Belfast, as I say, from 1603, Sir Arthur Chichester from Devon is basically given Belfast for his contribution to the fate of the Ulster Gaels. So he starts to build up the town, because there's only a crossing point, really. He builds up the town into an English-style town. And then from 1607 onwards, there's what they call the plantations. People are planted here from Scotland and from the south of England. So that builds up and builds up. So the town becomes basically a Protestant town, mixture of Anglican and Presbyterians. This particular church is called the First Presbyterian Church, because the very first Presbyterian section of Belfast was 1644. And what the Presbyterians actually did was kick out the Anglicans out of their church, and they took it over. 1649, unfortunately, Cromwell, arrives in Ireland, and a man called Colonel Venables is sent up to Belfast, and he then kicks those Presbyterian ministers out, because he has his own ministers, out of Belfast, and takes over the church that they were in, which is in High Street here. It's gone now, unfortunately. And he puts his horses and he takes lead off the roof to make bullets. So he turns it into a citadel. It's handed back to the people of Belfast 1660, and the Presbyterians gradually slip back in again, and then eventually, as I say, they come here. So that's why this church is called the First Presbyterian Church. But in 1720, as I say, with 3 churches been here, 2 being non-subscribing, in other words, don't subscribe to the Westminster Confession of Faith. It's a man-made document. Sounds very Calvinistic, and part of it is actually says like the Pope being Antichrist. So because they're non-subscribing, I think modern day Orthodox Presbyterians would refer to this as the old. They wouldn't like to give it the annotation of the new, the first.
So this is the OC, the old church Presbyterian.
They would call that that. This church is still called the First Church, because they would trace their lineage back to 1644.
Gotcha. But this, in the context of the marketplace of religion, you were telling me that this church financed a couple of buildings of Roman Catholic churches.
They did, that's right. As I say, typical of this church, and it applies even today. In 1783-84, this church here, the first and the second, contributed half the cost of the re-establishment of a Catholic church, which still exists in Church Street, Church Lane. Sorry, it's called St Mary's, and the second Catholic church to be re-established. Because remember, with the Reformation, Catholic churches basically disappeared. They also financed part of the cost, probably half the cost, of St Patrick's. So there's 2 Catholic churches, one 1784 and one 1815. The 2 churches here actually contribute money to that.
Do you think the church is still, not this church in particular, but the Christian church in general, is it still relevant to 21st century Britain?
It is really. It's definitely relevant. As I say to you, you know what I mean? You say not too many atheists in foxholes, which is true. And also there's peaks and troughs. I mean, there's scandal in church, especially in Ireland, where years ago the priest would be the centre point, and with all the scandal, a lot of people, do we really need priests? And priests should be married. So it's all this sort of conflict. But it's like peaks and troughs.
What about the Bible? Do you think the Bible's relevant to 21st century?
It is, and I'm not a great scholar. Being a Catholic, we didn't delve the way my Protestant friends can quote me chapter and verse. I can't, as such. No, it is relevant, as I say, but there will still be people who would question it. I mean, Jonah and the whale, Adam and Eve, did it exist? And then you have the creationists.
Yes.
I'm not sure if you, but I mean, to say that the world's only 6,000 years old, it flies in the face of science and such, So there's always a conflict, but the Bible, as I say, especially the New Testament, some very, very relevant stories you can relate to what's happening today.
As an ignoramus, and I am an ignoramus in Belfast, so bear with me.
Yeah.
Can I ask you what seems a stupid question?
Yeah.
I, believing in the marketplace of religion, I think that whoever you are, you need to have the ability to proclaim what you believe, what your holy book says, so that the truth comes to the surface.
Yeah.
Now, I like what this church did in terms of financing the other Roman Catholic churches. But here's the question. Did they inadvertently, somehow, almost prosper the beginning of the recent troubles?
No way, no. Because in those days as well, there's a group called United Irishmen. Now, today's present IRA, Republicans would take their lineage back to that. And a man who came up with the idea was a man called Dr. William Drennan. His father was minister here. Now he's practicing in Dublin, and what he does, he writes to his brother-in-law, Samuel Mateer, a member of this church. This is in May 1791, and he talks about a brotherhood of Catholic, Protestant, and the centre being Presbyterians, non-sectarian, bring everybody together. Unfortunately, with 1798, the rebellion at the whole, it fails. And then when you come into the middle, say, of the early and mid-Victorian period, you have a big influx of Catholics coming in, looking for work, okay? And that's when, no matter what country you go to, if you have a big minority, they're always perceived, not always are, but they're always perceived as a threat. And that's unfortunately the way things have built up. Yeah. So whenever we had the partition, out of the 32 counties, 1920, the Government of Ireland Act left 6 counties, part of Great Britain, the other 26 counties a free state, and it was built in that the majority would be Protestant. The old Ulster, in terms of a province, is 9 counties. 3 of those counties were left out because it would have meant that the Catholics would be in the majority in this new sort of state.
Right.
So the 6 counties that were set up were deliberately set up to have a Protestant majority. That's just the fact of it. So then there was discrimination against Catholics, and then you see in the 1960s there's an educated Catholic people who have been to university down to the 1947 Education Act, they start protesting, copying what's happening in civil rights in America. And of course that's seen as a threat to the British heritage by some people. And unfortunately, it breaks out into 1969-70, the Troubles.
Sir, thank you very much for
You're
this
welcome.
education and welcome into this church.
It's a very quick overview, as I say. There's much more to it.
But fantastic.
But the reason, as I say, me being a Catholic has a key to a Protestant church, even today.
Yes.
Now, 15, 20 years ago, our friend Ian Paisley, the Free Presbyterian, he probably would have been protesting about why a Catholic has a key.
Is that right?
Access. Oh, he would. Yeah, he's still quite. You know what I mean? I'm talking about 20 years ago. Things he's mellowed over the years, but there still would be that sort of thing. I mean, to give you an example here, there's a gentleman comes in here. He takes people around on the tour, and he wouldn't come in here for the first 3 months. He thought I was a pastor, I was saved, or extreme Christian and such. And I explained who I was. But I said the reason I opened this because I teach Irish history at the university. I explained about Thomas McCabe, who I've mentioned before. He loved that story, and he brings everybody in. So he finishes his 2-hour tour in here. One day he finishes off, takes them outside, and he's standing. A gentleman comes up with a little tract and puts it in his face. And Arthur, the person who was taking the people around, says, "Hold on a second, I'm trying to talk to these people." And the person says to him, "Oh, you can't wait for the word of God." And Arthur says, "But we've just come out of this church." And the reply from the gentleman who was giving it the tract was, and you would not believe this, "You mean that black hole?" Which I thought said more for the person who made that statement than actually, referring to another church as a black hole. I thought,
Oh my goodness.
So zealots, I can't stand zealots, no matter what religion. I think that sometimes can be the problem, So
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Okay.
God bless you.